Hello there. I do have some quotes from Don Juan de Nagual and also from the book by the Hartmanns. But I had a couple of images I wanted to share with you. The first was if you consider the cycle of the sun, the 11-year sunspot sun activity cycle, with the activity of the sun rising and then falling again and then rising every 11 years. I have the sense of it corkscrewing upwards and then corkscrewing back downwards. And because largely our society is controlled from the outside, you have to work with the tides. There is no other option. You have to follow the tides as they rise, and if you do not, then they will wash over you and they will wash past you, and not only will they go past you, but they will work you to the bone. You've missed the boat, you see. And I was thinking that I was wondering where in society it would be possible to do interesting work. Our society, the way it is today. Where is it that work is not mechanical? Where is it that there is a kind of open and interesting place to do work? And one place is in IT, using your mind. It's still allowed to be interesting there. There's not a lot of health and safety there. It's an open area of society. But the problem with it is that although many human beings do indeed work with their mind, they have lost what is inside. It's like the energy has corkscrewed all the way up, and it's now in that area of the intellect. But on its way up, humanity has not managed to knit together their ray of creation. And so what you have is people in the area of the intellect, but with in the basement, in the body, it is not tied together correctly. So the mind lives alone and is impotent and comes to nothing. And then I suppose at some point it'll go down again and it'll rise again. And human beings have a certain number of cycles with which to make it or break it. And if they don't, then the cycles as they oscillate up and down will eventually wipe human beings off the face of the planet, and somebody else will have a chance. That was one image I had. Another image was about why didn't Gurdjieff create more forms in his work? It's obvious to me that people in the fourth way don't really do a lot of work. I mean, if you're a Buddhist, you're practicing Buddhist, you sit in meditation every day, morning and evening. The same for many traditions. But people in the work just don't. And I suppose they think that it's a kind of wonderful thing, but it's not that there are no fixed forms in the fourth way. But the fourth way is the cannibalism or the cannibalizing of all activities in ordinary life, and with a special and subtle effort making them into a form. But how many people actually do that, you see? My teacher, who was not a fourth way teacher, he was an Eastern teacher, he taught very subtle things. But after many years, he simplified the teaching and kept it very formal, because he saw that his teaching was going past students, and they may have been very excited, but they weren't really getting it. They weren't established. They hadn't crossed the line. And in order to protect them, he simplified the teaching and formalized it, and sat in a more serious, formal and perhaps boring way, but it was necessary to help his students. At least that was the intention of my teacher. And perhaps Gurdjieff should have done that, because when I read the books by the early students, for instance, the Hartmanns, they seem to be awfully dependent on him. He fed them the way maybe Pythagoras did with his own students, from ancient Greece, that kind of thing. But how many of Gurdjieff's students have reached the same height as him? And what happened to his lineage? Maybe it would have been better to insert more formal work, and also more economic work, since they were always struggling for money. Maybe. But from another side, there is a reason why he could have, in a valid way, not chosen that. And that is that the spiritual journey has to always come from you. The spiritual path is something very profound, and it's something you have to choose for your own reasons. It has to actually come from you. And because of that, Gurdjieff tried to give many experiences to his students, but he didn't force them in any particular direction, because it would have resulted perhaps in students who reached certain levels, but it wouldn't have come from them, which takes me on to a third area. Gurdjieff says that impressions in most human beings sound only at do, which means that people receive material from the outside, but it doesn't penetrate them. It sounds only at do. It doesn't sound do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It just stops at do. One way of describing that is that human beings don't really digest their feelings. Instead, they externalize them into society, and they project them, because they do not have any skill at going inside and recognizing who they are and feeling themselves inside. They work with their inner feelings through other people. For instance, their anxieties they may project on Vladimir Putin, who serves as a coat hanger to hang that coat on. And one problem with that is that the projection is imperfect, because you project your feelings onto somebody who is sort of in the right region. Somebody who's a little scary, you project something to do with scariness on him. But you can't really work, it doesn't really work to work with these things in the world through projections, because they are very imperfect. And the attempt to do so creates a kind of madness where nobody really knows what they're saying or who's saying what. Now, before I get to the quotes, one of the practices that I have been doing is to say the Catholic prayers, the Lord's Prayer and Hail Mary, but very slowly, and with each line trying to feel emotionally the complete thought of the line, and to transfer it from the words, which are intellectual, into the emotions, so that I force them to pass through that barrier between the first and the second stop. and possibly also into the third physically. So there is a line, Our Father who art in heaven, and that's intellectual. But to try to feel it as a feeling form, it's a feeling form, you see, and try to actually feel it in my energy body fully. Another image I had this morning that I'll set down before I forget it is about the idea that the moon feeds on human beings. Human beings are food for the moon, and that upon their death, the energy that has been accrued inside a human being lifts up off the surface of the earth and goes to the moon, which is quite a far out idea. But one way of experiencing this in a small way is, for instance, with women who are menstruating. And I spent most of my life living with women. And one thing I know for certain is that when they are menstruating, there's a very clear kind of clawing coming from the woman, clawing at the man. And the man has this, it's not... These things are external forces pulling on you. And I also noticed that in women at certain points in their cycle, perhaps not at the point of menstruation but at a different point, they start to get frisky. They start to get frisky, and they have this clawing inside of them to find somebody to exercise with, you see. So that's one way of experiencing the clawing of the moon, but in a small way. You know, another thing that comes to mind is that no matter what you do to a man, he will never exert that force on you, because a man is not a woman. And you know, if people want to know the definition of a woman, it is she who has the ability to claw that energy from you. That is what a woman is. It's a cosmic structure, and whatever you do to a man is not going to make the slightest bit of difference. Men are always men, cosmologically. And therefore, the whole LGBT business is coming from false personality. It's nothing else. There's nothing real about it, nothing cosmological about it. It is only false personality. And in our world, which has a lot of imagery, as well as being highly sexualized, what happens inside people is that very strong and difficult to shift many eyes are created in people that are attached to sexual energy, and it makes them extremely difficult to shift. And as time goes on in the Western culture, people are filled with these many eyes, which are much stronger than normal, and they suffer them. They are unable to see clearly because their false personality becomes thickly encrusted and full of this sort of sexually attached many eyes, and it gives them very little chance to see straight and to discover their soul and to, you know, do the work. This is a small story from the Hartmann's book. On the last day, Mr. Gurdjieff played a trick on me, which I must record. He said to me, "Toma, no money. You had a concert a day ago." My wife, knowing the difference between the voice of Mr. Gurdjieff when he